What's going on, guys? So you are here with me in my Ford F450. This is my 2017 F450 King Ranch. Pretty much looks the same as the 2020, and that's probably the only reason why I haven't considered getting a 2020 model. I'm actually kind of waiting for the new body style to come out in terms of the interior. I've had opportunities to spend time in the 2021 F150, and I see where they're going and what direction they're going in. There's a lot of cool elements that I think will make it over to the next generation of this Super Duty. So I believe 2020 is kind of a mid-cycle refresh with a focus on the next generation Power Stroke more than anything. They did some minor updates to the outside of the truck, but for the most part it was mainly engine and transmission that benefited in 2020. I do wish I had the headlights though on the 2020 because they are far better in terms of light output. Anyways, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is to give you all a 3-year update on what it's like owning this 2017 F450 King Ranch, as well as some of the driving impressions, some of the things that so many people ask me about when they're considering this truck versus some of the other options that compete against it from Ford, General Motors, and Ram. Now I say Ford because the F350 dually truck is a genuine competitor to the F450, and there's reasons why you might want that truck over this one. Anyways, that's what the topic of this video is going to be. Hang tight, I'll be right back. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is ride comfort, because I know a lot of people are on the fence in terms of getting an F350 dually, a Ram 3500 dually, or one of the GM 3500 dualies. And when you look at all these trucks, the one differentiation between this truck and those trucks, even including the F350 dually, is the fact that all of those trucks run 17-inch tires or 17-inch wheels, and the F450 runs a 19.5-inch wheel and tire. Now the difference ultimately comes down to the fact that the F450 has a commercial spec tire on it. It comes with Continental tires in some cases, and some of the newer trucks have a different tire, and I'm not 100% sure which brand they are off the top of my head, but 19.5-inch commercial spec medium duty tires. When you look at all the other dualies on the market in terms of a 1-ton, they come with 17-inch wheels and tires and a light truck tire. So the difference there is big in terms of ride comfort, because if you get a 1-ton, you're going to have a taller side profile and a softer compound. So the tire itself will actually act as part of the suspension and absorb some of the harshness while you're driving. And that in itself can lead to a smoother ride. Now, when you look at the F450 that we're in now, and you kind of compare the ride characteristics from it to an F350 dually or any of the other 3500 dualies from the other manufacturers, that is really where the difference comes in terms of ride comfort. If this truck had the same type of wheel tire setup as any of the other 1-ton trucks, then arguably the ride would be very, very similar. But the one distinguishing factor that makes the 450 noticeably different in terms of ride characteristic is the tire. And that's going to be the biggest factor when you think of ride comfort, mainly because these tires, again, much harder compound, and they're narrower than most tires. So these tires are only going to be about 6.5 inches wide, and they're going to do a lot of what people call rut steer, where if you have imperfections in the road and you have ruts, the truck wants to kind of pull into them. And I think almost anybody that's either driven an F450, an F550, a Ram 4500, 5500, or either of the GM heavy-duty trucks, you'll realize that you get some of that rut steer. Now, in the term of General Motors, it would be a 4500, 5500, or 6500 series truck. Now, I always point to the big advantage of this truck being its wide track front axle. The fact that this truck has an incredibly tight turning radius because the tires can cut in at about a 45-degree angle versus typical trucks, which are closer to about 37 degrees. And I believe it's actually closer to 47 degrees in terms of the wheel cut on this truck. So maneuverability is pretty phenomenal. It's almost game-changing. If you've driven one of these trucks, you kind of understand what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you kind of settle for the fact that the turning angle on your truck might be fine because that's all you're used to, but the minute you hop into a truck that has significantly improved turning you instantly notice it and it becomes something that you almost must have. Now, in terms of this truck, I've tried to get into other trucks, and I've tried to figure how well I can live with the reduced turning angle that I get on those trucks. Recently, the Ram that I drove, as well as the GM or the Chevy truck before that, both dually trucks, they had what I would consider to be reasonable turning angles, but the minute you'd make a U-turn in an area that you clear the curb by 3 or 4 feet in this truck, and in those trucks you overrun the curb by 3 or 4 feet, you appreciate the maneuverability that you get with the F450. Now, is it worth compromising ride comfort for maneuverability? And in my opinion, for me it is. For a lot of people, though, it's not. There's a lot of folks out there that get an F450 and they can't stand the ride, so much so that they have to get rid of it. It's just not comfortable for them. In my specific truck, as it's configured, I have about a 4,800 pound cargo capacity. It would really be like 5,500 pounds, almost 6,000 pounds, if you factor in the larger components that make up the rear end of this truck, right? The larger half shafts, the more robust wheels and tires, the larger brakes, all of that stuff that really had to be derated by Ford to fit this truck in a class 3 category of 14,000 pound GVWR. Well, in reality, if they didn't have to categorize it as a 14K vehicle, it would probably have about an additional 1,000 pounds worth of payload capacity. That being said, though, at about 4,800 pounds worth of posted or rated capacity, I have probably 1,000 pounds of that's taken up in terms of attachments to my truck, from the rear bumpers, the air compressor, the front bumper, the winch, the toolbox, all of those things, because they definitely eat into my payload capacity, and having that extra weight actually softens the ride a little bit. So moving from the 2020 Ram 3500 Laramie, the red one that I just reviewed a while back, into my truck, I actually feel like my ride is a little bit more tamed than that truck because I don't have so much unsprung tension. My truck has enough weight resting on the springs now that it actually dampens the ride a little bit. It basically allows the leaf springs and the coil springs up front to be more effective and to take some of that load and give the suspension more flexibility versus just complete unsprung weight where you don't have anything on your springs hardly except the weight of the truck, and all of a sudden you have this situation where your springs don't want to give very much when you go over bumps and you get an incredibly jarring ride. In the case of this truck, I really don't get that anymore. I get a little bit of it, and I can honestly tell you, my wife yells at me all the time because if she's sitting in the back with our youngest daughter and we go over rough roads, it throws her around a bit. It's not a smooth ride. It's not a ride that she would characterize as comfortable, and she lets me know. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you plan on going with a truck like this. You're gonna have a rough ride. It's not probably gonna be terrible, but as you add things to your truck, so long as you can still maintain enough cargo capacity to haul the trailer, the thing you're going to be carrying with it, it will help tame the ride down. It will help dampen the ride in a way that might be manageable for you. But all that being said, I just wanted to give you that update. I've had this truck again for 3 years. I absolutely love it. I've been in a 2020 model of all of its competitors, including a 2020 F450, if you saw the max tow that we did in Phoenix when we took the 35,000 pound load up and down the mountain. And based on all of those media drives, as well as the loaner vehicles I've had, as well as, all the opportunities I've had to trade my truck in, and the fact that my truck is paid off, it really has convinced me to keep this truck until there's a dramatic change, until something big comes out. I told you guys that in 2016 when I had my 2016 F450 Platinum, basically the previous body style, and I said I was going to hold on for a little bit because I wanted to make sure they worked the bugs out of it, and I wanted to wait for at least the Job 2 version of it to come out, which essentially is kind of like the second generation of the release. They've worked out bugs, they've made software changes, things like that. So that's why I waited almost, I'd probably say about 10 months before I upgraded to the 2017 F450, which I currently have now. And this truck has been absolutely fantastic. The only issue I've had with it is really the sunroof and then the dented tailgate, which I already got replaced. So, all of that being said, I'm happy with the truck. I don't anticipate upgrading until a new version of this truck comes out, or, you know, in case I have some type of a major issue with it, which basically makes me, you know, fall out of love with this thing and I'm no longer interested. So, you know, barring those two things from happening anytime soon, I'll probably keep this one for a while. Plus, I've done so much to it, it's hard to justify getting out of a truck and then getting into one that's almost identical and then doing all the same things to it that I already did to this one. Anyways, guys, just wanted to give you a quick rant video since I'm on the road and I'll be on the road for a while. Figured it was a worthwhile update. And we are towing the 42 RDB Vanley Beacon. This time we're headed up to the Austin area. We're going to go camping. And this is a quick weekend trip, so we'll be back in town on Monday. But I just wanted to give you an opportunity to hear some of my updates in terms of this truck, what I feel about it now that I've driven several of the other dualies, and you know, if it's still a truck I plan on keeping. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.